At 0230 hours, in the cold dark of the Taiwan Strait, the sea offered no warning. Only a thin, ghostly wake, glowing faintly with phosphorescence cut across the water, curving where no torpedo's wake should ever bend. Lieutenant Commander Richard O'Kane watched it through the periscope, realizing with a calm born of countless battles that the weapon he had just fired was coming back. 15 seconds, maybe less. Enough time for a commander to understand that the most successful American submarine of the war was about to be struck not by an enemy, but by its own flawed design. Before this night, Richard O'Kane had been the rising force of the Silent Service, a man many would call the best American submarine commander of World War II. He had shaped crews through relentless training, driven the USS Tang into the heart of Japanese convoys, and rewritten what submarine warfare could be. Yet fate had led him to this moment, standing above the waves, watching a Mark 18 torpedo complete its deadly circle. How does a leader reach such extraordinary heights, only to face a tragedy no doctrine could prevent? To answer that, we must go back to Wahoo, to Morton, to the lessons that forged a legend. He was not born into the Silent Service. Richard O'Kane began, like many young officers of his generation, on the broad decks of surface ships, cruisers, and destroyers that taught him discipline, precision, and the rhythms of blue water seamanship. But something in him sought a different arena, a place where decisions were made in the narrow space between steel bulkheads, where a single voice could redirect the fate of a crew. In 1938, he chose submarines. That choice would define his life. Submarine school in New London tested men quietly. No grand speeches, no marching bands. Just hours of systems, mathematics, emergency drills, and the unspoken understanding that in wartime, a submarine was both a weapon and a tomb. Richard O'Kane absorbed every lesson. Beneath his calm exterior grew a tactical instinct, fast, analytical, decisive. Those traits drew him to the next chapter of his career aboard USS Wahoo, a boat that would become the crucible of his transformation. When O'Kane arrived on USS Wahoo, the war in the Pacific was shifting, but submarine doctrine had not. Early patrols under Lieutenant Commander Marvin Kennedy followed every regulation, every cautionary note in the manual. Torpedoes missed, convoys slipped away, and Wahoo, like many American submarines, returned with empty results. The ocean did not reward hesitation. Everything changed when Lieutenant Commander Dudley "Mush" Morton took command. Morton was a different breed of officer, sharp-minded, relentlessly offensive, and convinced that a submarine's purpose was to strike first and strike hard. Before Wahoo's third patrol, he told the crew that the boat was expendable, but their mission was not. That declaration did not frighten them, it focused them. Then came Morton's most radical move. He handed the periscope to Richard O'Kane. No American captain had ever ceded the periscope to his executive officer during attacks, but Morton understood that clarity in battle required two minds working as one. The captain controlling the plot, the XO controlling the eyes. From that moment, O'Kane became the point of the spear, guiding Wahoo into firing positions with a confidence that surprised even veteran sailors. Their first great test came at Wewak Harbor in New Guinea. Doctrine said a submarine should never enter a defended harbor, too many nets, too little depth, too narrow an exit. Morton ignored doctrine. Submerged, Wahoo crept past minefields and patrol patterns until O'Kane saw the silhouette of the Japanese destroyer Harusame at anchor. Destroyers were submarine killers by design. Engaging one at close range bordered on reckless. Wahoo fired 6 torpedoes. 5 ran wide or malfunctioned, reminders of the early war Mark 14 flaws that haunted skippers across the Pacific. But the 6th found its mark. Harusame broke apart and sank in minutes. The escape was silent. No depth charges, no pursuit. Only the stunned realization among the crew that they had just accomplished the impossible. 2 days later, they attacked a heavily guarded convoy, sinking multiple ships, including the troop transport Buyo Maru. The aftermath, filled with lifeboats and armed survivors, led Morton to make a grim, tactical choice to prevent those troops from returning to battle. It was a harsh decision, remembered with controversy, but it reflected the brutal logic of the Pacific War. Through these patrols, Richard O'Kane learned what the textbooks never taught: how to fight a submarine war built on speed, nerve, and trust. Those lessons would follow him when he took command of USS Tang submarine, shaping him into the best American submarine commander of World War II. He learned how to fight on Wahoo, but he perfected the craft on USS Tang submarine. When Richard O'Kane took command of the new boat in October 1943, he carried Morton's lessons with him, but he intended to go further, transforming not just tactics, but the very culture of a submarine crew. He believed a submarine could only be as sharp as the men who served aboard her, and so he turned Tang into something rare in wartime. A machine calibrated by discipline, drilled until instinct became art. Training was relentless. Officers learned to identify Japanese silhouettes in seconds, estimate range by eye, and judge speed from the shape of a wake. If anyone hesitated, the drill began again. Periscope work, the craft Morton had entrusted to him, became the centerpiece. In an era when commanders were taught to raise the periscope only briefly, O'Kane encouraged longer, clearer looks. Information, he insisted, was a weapon more valuable than steel. Night surface attacks became the heart of his doctrine. In darkness, USS Tang submarine could run at full speed, maneuver freely, and ambush a convoy before escorts understood what was happening. Radar guided their approach, training sharpened their timing. A night attack demanded absolute trust, and that trust turned O'Kane's crew into something akin to a single organism, fast, silent, deadly. Tang's first patrol tested those ideas. In February 1944, the boat sighted a convoy in the Caroline and Mariana Islands. When an escort turned toward them, O'Kane executed a hard emergency dive, then returned to periscope depth minutes later, refusing to abandon the attack. With calm precision, he fired 4 torpedoes, sinking the freighter Guillotin Maru. By dawn, Tang had torn into the convoy again. The patrol ended with 5 ships sunk, a result most submarines never achieved in their entire wartime service. The second patrol revealed a different side of O'Kane's leadership. Assigned lifeguard duty off Truk, Tang rescued 22 downed American aviators under shore battery fire. Space was scarce, food was halved, and the boat sailed 3,500 miles home, with men sleeping on every spare inch of deck plating. O'Kane gave up his own bunk. For the crew, it confirmed what they already believed. Their captain demanded everything from them, but never more than he demanded from himself. Then came the third patrol, the one that stunned the submarine force. In June 1944, Richard O'Kane attacked a massive convoy guarded by 16 escorts, an engagement doctrine insisted submariners avoid. He charged straight into the formation at night, firing salvos left and right as ships burned in succession. By dawn, 4 major vessels were going down, and Japanese records would later confirm even more. Tang sank 10 ships on that patrol, the most successful single patrol of the war by any American submarine. With each victory, O'Kane's reputation grew. Aggression, speed, discipline, and trust had fused into a system that reshaped Pacific submarine warfare. And yet, the war was far from over. The waters ahead Japan's doorstep would demand even more from the man many already whispered was the best American submarine commander of World War II. By the summer of 1944, Richard O'Kane had already surpassed the achievements of most submarine captains. Yet the 4th patrol of USS Tang submarine pushed him deeper into the heart of danger, Japan's own coastal waters. Off Honshu, every ship was a potential threat, every aircraft a hunter. Still, Tang struck with precision, sinking 7 more vessels before returning to Pearl Harbor empty of torpedoes and full of momentum. O'Kane was now widely regarded as the best American submarine commander of World War II, a title earned not by myth, but by a record impossible to ignore. Exhaustion crept in, though he hid it well. 4 patrols in 9 months had worn him thin, weight lost, sleep shortened, the strain of command visible only to those who served closest to him. His superiors urged rest. O'Kane refused. Tang was his crew, his responsibility. 1 more patrol, he told them. 1 more. The 5th patrol was meant to be routine. The Taiwan Strait, a narrow corridor of shipping and danger. When ordered to join a wolf pack under Commander John Kolsch, O'Kane declined. He had always fought alone. Tang's speed and aggression made her difficult to coordinate with slower boats. Alone, he believed, he could strike harder, and strike he did. On the night of the 23rd of October 1944, Tang entered a convoy from point-blank range, 8 torpedoes, 8 hits, ships erupting in fire around her as escorts scrambled in confusion. At one point, a Japanese destroyer charged directly toward Tang. With no time to dive, O'Kane ordered full speed and turned sharply. Moments later, the destroyer exploded, hit by a torpedo, or rammed by another ship in the chaos. When the sea finally calmed, 5 enemy ships were sinking, It was one of the most devastating submarine attacks in American naval history. But the ocean remembers balance. Triumph carries a cost. On the following night, October 24, Tang sighted another convoy hugging the Chinese coast, slow, heavy, vulnerable. Only 2 torpedoes remained. O'Kane fired the first, a direct hit. He fired the second, a Mark 18 electric torpedo, the same model whispered about in wardrooms after rare but deadly circular runs. Moments later, O'Kane saw the phosphorescent wake bend, then curve wider, then turn fully around. 15 seconds. Emergency flank speed. Hard right rudder. But Tang had no room, no momentum to outrun the weapon she had just released. The Mark 18 struck aft, detonating 570 pounds of torpex against the hull. Everything behind the conning tower vanished in a single blast. 9 men on the bridge were thrown into the sea. Forward compartments held. 30 men survived the initial disaster, but they were trapped at 180 feet, fighting smoke, rising carbon dioxide, and the grim awareness that rescue would not come. Chief Torpedo Man William Leibold organized an escape using the Momsen Lung. 13 men attempted the ascent. Only 5 reached the surface alive. In the end, just 9 of Tang's 87 crew survived. The submarine that had rewritten the rules of naval warfare now lay broken on the seabed of the Taiwan Strait, a war grave for 78 men. And Richard O'Kane, the commander who had risen higher than any of his peers, was now drifting in the dark, awaiting the next chapter of war capture. The sea did not end Richard O'Kane's war. The Japanese found the survivors drifting at dawn, hauled them aboard patrol boats, and beat them bloody in anger and grief. Tang had sunk dozens of their ships. Now they had the men responsible. O'Kane endured the blows silently, conserving what little strength remained. Soon, he and the others were taken ashore and transported to Ofuna, a secret interrogation center the prisoners called the torture farm. Ofuna existed outside the Geneva Convention. No records, no Red Cross, no oversight. Its purpose was simple: extract intelligence from high-value prisoners. For Japan, the most coveted secrets were those tied to American submarine warfare: depth limits, sonar capabilities, fire control methods, and, above all, torpedo technology. Interrogators starved O'Kane, beat him, kept him awake for days. His answers never changed. Name, rank, serial number, nothing more. The other Tang survivors followed his example. Their silence protected thousands of American submariners, still fighting at sea. In a war where intelligence drove outcomes, refusing to break was not just discipline, it was strategy. By late 1944, the prisoners were transferred to Omori, a punishment camp on an artificial island in Tokyo Bay. Here, they met Corporal Mutsuhiro Watanabe, the Bird, a man whose reputation for cruelty echoed through the Japanese prison system. Watanabe targeted officers, especially submarine commanders, believing that breaking their spirit would soften the morale of every man under them. He singled out Richard O'Kane, beating him daily, forcing him into degrading tasks, withholding food in an effort to shatter the resolve of the man who had sunk more Japanese ships than any other commander. Yet O'Kane never broke. His endurance became a quiet center of gravity for the other prisoners. If the most hunted officer in the camp could endure, then so could they. When Japan surrendered in August 1945, American forces arrived at Omori. The prisoners, emaciated, sick, skeletal, were freed. Every one of Tang's 9 survivors had lived through captivity. For the U.S. Navy, their return marked more than relief. It marked the beginning of analysis. Post-war examinations revealed what the Tang crew had suspected. The Mark 18 torpedo had a fundamental flaw in its gyroscope, capable of causing deadly circular runs. Investigators also combed through Japanese shipping records, cross-referencing losses. The results stunned even veteran officers. USS Tang submarine had actually sunk 33 ships, not 24. It was the unquestioned record of the best American submarine commander of World War II. Those findings reshaped doctrine. The Navy embedded O'Kane's principles into training: speed, aggression, precision, trust, and taught Tang's patrols as case studies in tactical innovation. Around the world, naval officers studying Pacific submarine warfare found the same lesson. Leadership, built on preparation, not bravado, could change the course of an entire campaign. When Richard O'Kane returned home, the war was over, but its echoes stayed with him. Honors came quickly: Medal of Honor, 3 Navy Crosses, 3 Silver Stars, yet he rarely spoke of the medals. Instead, he spoke of the men who had sailed with him, the 78 who never came home from the USS Tang submarine, and the thousands of submariners whose victories were paid for in silence beneath the Pacific. For all his achievements, O'Kane understood that leadership in war is measured not only by success, but by the weight a commander carries long after the shooting stops. In the years that followed, he shaped generations of officers. At submarine school, at the Naval War College, and at reunions where aging veterans clasped hands and retold stories only they could understand, Richard O'Kane repeated the same principles. Train harder than the enemy expects, trust the crew more than you trust any plan, and never ask a man to do something you would not do yourself. These lessons, simple, precise, lived rather than spoken, became the backbone of modern U.S. submarine doctrine and reinforced his legacy as the best American submarine commander of World War II. His books, Clear the Bridge and Wahoo, preserved not just facts, but the human weight of submarine warfare, the moments of calculation, fear, courage, and loss that shaped the silent service. When he died in 1994, and later when the Navy commissioned the destroyer USS O'Kane, sailors, some too young to remember the war, stood in formation and honored a man whose influence had outlived the steel hulls he commanded. Today, Tang lies somewhere in the Taiwan Strait, 180 feet down, a war grave for her crew. The sea has claimed her, but not the story. Tang's patrols, her final minutes, and her commander's example continue to be studied in classrooms, simulators, and wardrooms. Modern submariners still speak of O'Kane's judgment, his discipline, and the decisions that defined both victory and tragedy. And perhaps that is the true measure of legacy. Not the ships sunk, but the minds he shaped. Before you go, what do you believe is the most important lesson from Richard O'Kane's story? Do you think the risks he took were justified? Comment 1 for yes, 0 for no. If you value stories that remind us how history is written under pressure, in darkness, and by ordinary men asked to do extraordinary things, consider subscribing. There are more chapters of military history waiting to be told, each one a reminder of who we were and who we must choose to be.